Jack Turner had lived most of his life under the wide, endless sky of the western plains. The open land, the wind brushing through tall grass, and the silence of long days were things he was used to. He worked from sunrise to sunset, caring for his horses and cattle, fixing fences, and managing the large piece of land he had inherited from his father. To outsiders, Jack seemed like a man who enjoyed being alone, but deep inside, he sometimes felt the weight of that silence more than he admitted. His cabin sat at the far edge of his ranch, hidden among tall pine trees. When Jack was a young man, the cabin had looked almost new. But time changed everything. The wooden planks had become faded from years of harsh sunlight, dust collected on every surface, and the fireplace was filled with ashes that had not been cleaned in months. Clothes were stacked in corners, tools were lying all around, and old newspapers covered the small dining table. Jack did not try to make it look better. He rarely had the time or the energy after long days of work. One morning, as Jack sat on his old wooden chair drinking black coffee, he noticed sunlight shining through the window and hitting the dust floating in the air. He watched the tiny particles slowly dance, and for the first time, it bothered him. He felt as if his home was slowly disappearing under layers of dirt and neglect. The cabin didn't feel like a home anymore, just a place to sleep after long, tiring days. Jack sighed and rubbed his forehead. He knew he needed help, but he had never been good at asking for it. Later that week, while he was in town buying supplies, he overheard two older men talking outside the general store. They were discussing a service where women traveled to distant places to work as companions, helpers, or housekeepers. One of the men jokingly referred to it as a mail-order bride system, though many of the women were not actually looking for marriage. Some simply wanted work, safety, and a chance to earn enough money to support their families. Jack listened quietly without joining the conversation. Something about it stayed in his mind. He didn't need a wife, and he certainly wasn't searching for romance, but the idea of someone coming to clean his cabin, cook a few meals, and bring order to his messy life seemed like the answer he had been looking for. For days, he thought about it. He felt unsure. Would it be strange? Would the woman feel uncomfortable staying in a ranch so far from town? Would people gossip about him? He spent many evenings pacing around his cabin, staring at the dusty walls, imagining someone sweeping the floors or washing the windows. Every time he looked at the mess growing around him, his decision became a little clearer. Finally, one quiet night, he lit a lamp, pulled a piece of paper from his drawer, and sat at his table. He held the pen for a long time, without writing anything. He wasn't good with words, but he decided to be honest. He introduced himself, explained that he needed help cleaning and maintaining his cabin, and he made it clear he wasn't asking for a wife-only assistance. He promised fair payment, safe living conditions, and respect. After reading the letter several times, he carefully folded it and sent it through the local post office the next morning. Days turned into weeks. Jack didn't expect a reply quickly, but he checked the mailbox every time he rode to town. At first, there was nothing. He tried not to be disappointed, but he wondered if his letter had been ignored or lost. Maybe no one wanted to travel so far and live in a lonely ranch. Maybe his offer sounded strange. Still, he waited. One afternoon, when he returned from fixing a fence on the far side of his land, he saw a small envelope sitting just inside his cabin door. His heart jumped. He quickly picked it up and opened it with shaky hands. Inside was a simple letter, written in neat handwriting. The letter was from a woman named Elena. She thanked him for his clear and respectful request. She wrote that she had experience in cleaning, cooking, and caring for homes. She explained she was willing to travel to his ranch and work for a few weeks. She didn't ask many questions. She didn't complain about the distance. She simply wrote that she hoped to earn enough money to return home safely. There was something sincere and gentle in her words that touched Jack. He felt relief and a strange, quiet excitement. He had grown used to solitude, but the thought of someone stepping into his silent cabin made him nervous and hopeful at the same time. He spent the next few days preparing for her arrival. He tried to clean a little on his own, but the more he cleaned, the more he realized how much work still needed to be done. Still, he swept the porch, washed the dusty dishes he found in the sink, and changed the sheets on the guest bed. He even picked a few wildflowers and placed them in a small jar on the table, unsure if it looked thoughtful or foolish. The day of her arrival came with a calm breeze and a clear sky. Jack rode to the small stagecoach stop near town. He stood there, feeling awkward, wondering if Elena would recognize him or if he should call out her name. The coach approached slowly, raising a cloud of dust behind it. When it stopped, several passengers stepped out. Then Jack saw her. Elena was a woman of simple appearance, dressed in a modest, well-worn skirt and blouse. She carried a small bag, nothing more. Her face looked calm, but her eyes showed a tiredness. Jack recognized immediately someone who had seen many difficult days, yet continued to move forward. She looked around, searching for someone, and Jack stepped forward. "Are you Elena?" he asked politely. She nodded with a gentle smile. "And you must be Mr. Turner." Jack felt suddenly aware of his rough clothes and sunburned skin. He nodded and helped carry her small bag. She seemed grateful but quiet, observing her surroundings with care. As they rode back toward the ranch, silence filled the space between them, but it didn't feel uncomfortable. Elena looked out at the wide land, the open fields, the long stretches of grass waving in the wind. Jack found himself explaining small details about the ranch, where the river ran, how far the land stretched, and how the cabin was hidden near a cluster of trees. She listened politely, asking small questions here and there. When they reached the cabin, Elena stepped down from the horse and looked around slowly. She didn't react with shock or disappointment. Instead, she nodded as if she had already expected the simplicity of rural life. Jack led her inside, and although he had tried to clean, he knew it still looked messy. But Elena didn't complain. She simply placed her bag on the floor and rolled up her sleeves. Jack watched as she walked around the cabin with quiet focus, studying everything calmly. She approached her work with determination, and it made Jack feel strangely relieved, as if he had invited a gentle but strong presence into his life. Though he didn't fully understand why, Jack felt that Elena's arrival marked the beginning of something different, something that would change his quiet, lonely life in ways he couldn't yet predict. Elena's first morning at the ranch began before the sun even rose. Jack woke up to the faint sound of movement inside the cabin. He rubbed his eyes and stepped out of his room quietly, wondering what she was doing. To his surprise, Elena was already sweeping the wooden floor, her hair tied back neatly, and her expression calm. Jack felt a mix of admiration and guilt. He had hired her for help, yes, but he didn't expect her to start working before dawn. He cleared his throat softly so she wouldn't be startled. She turned and gave him a small, polite smile, as if she had been awake for hours. "You didn't need to start so early," Jack said quietly. Elena shook her head gently. "There's a lot to be done, and morning light helps." Jack glanced around. In 24 hours, the cabin already looked different. The air felt lighter. The corners that were once dark with dust now looked brighter. Clothes were folded, dishes were washed, and the small jar of wildflowers he had placed on the table now stood in a clean, polished space. It amazed him how fast things could change with a pair of caring hands. He made coffee and offered her a cup, which she accepted with gratitude. They drank quietly. The silence between them was peaceful, not awkward. She glanced around with thoughtful eyes, as though planning the rest of the day in her head. After breakfast, she began working again, moving from one corner of the cabin to the next. Jack tried to help, but every time he picked something up, she gently took it from him and said, "I'll do that. You have ranch work to take care of." Her tone was not rude, just firm and practical, so Jack left her to it, stepping outside to handle the morning chores. But throughout the day, he found his mind drifting back to the cabin. He wondered how she was managing, if she needed anything, or if she was overwhelmed by the amount of work. Each time he returned, the cabin looked cleaner, brighter, and more alive. One afternoon, he returned to find Elena standing on a chair, dusting the high shelves that Jack had not touched in years. He quickly steadied the chair, worried she might fall. "You don't have to do the hard parts alone," he said. She looked down at him with a soft smile. "It's all right. I've done harder things before." There was something in her tone, something hidden, almost like a quiet pain. Jack noticed it but didn't ask questions. He had promised himself he wouldn't make her uncomfortable. She worked with such quiet determination, as if she was racing against time, and Jack didn't want to add to her worries. As days passed, Elena not only cleaned the cabin but also brought warmth into it. She opened windows during the day to let fresh air in. She cooked simple but delicious meals that reminded Jack of the kind of food he hadn't tasted in years. She sang softly while she worked, just barely loud enough for Jack to hear from outside. Her voice was gentle, like a breeze moving through tall grass. Jack found himself looking forward to evenings just so he could sit at the table while Elena prepared dinner. She never talked about herself, but she listened when Jack spoke. He told her small stories about ranch life, about his horses, about the storms that sometimes hit the land. She nodded, asked calm questions, and smiled in a way that made him feel lighter. One evening, the two of them sat on the porch after a long day. The sky was painted with shades of orange and gold. Jack leaned back on the wooden railing, watching Elena as she looked out at the land with thoughtful eyes. "It's peaceful out here," she said softly. Jack nodded. "It is, but it can get lonely." Her expression shifted slightly, as if she understood that feeling too well. She didn't say anything, but Jack felt a quiet connection form between them, something unspoken. Still, Elena stayed distant in certain ways. When Jack asked where she was from, she gave simple answers, but avoided details. When he offered to pay her more or help her with anything personal, she politely declined. There was always a wall around her, gentle but firm. She was kind, but she never let the conversation go into her private life. Jack didn't push, but curiosity grew inside him every day. One afternoon, Jack returned from town earlier than usual. As he approached the cabin, he heard Elena talking inside, not singing this time, but speaking in a low voice. He paused, unsure if he should enter. Her tone sounded worried. "I will be back soon. I promise," she whispered. Jack stepped forward, and the floorboard creaked slightly. Elena immediately fell silent. When she opened the door and saw him, she looked startled for a moment, but she quickly regained her calm expression. "You're back early," she said. "Yes," Jack replied. "Everything all right?" She nodded quickly. "Just talking to myself. Sometimes it helps me think." Jack wanted to believe her, but something didn't feel right. The way she held her hands together tightly, the way her eyes avoided his, it made him feel that she was carrying a heavy burden. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about her tired eyes, the way she worked tirelessly as if she was worried about something beyond the cabin walls. He wondered what kind of life she had before coming here. What made her take such a long journey just for temporary work? Why did she react with such relief when he accepted her without asking personal questions? The next morning, Jack found her in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She looked more tired than usual, as if she hadn't slept at all. He watched her for a moment before speaking. "Are you sure you're okay, Elena?" She paused, her hand still on the pot. Then she forced a small smile. "Yes, Mr. Turner. Just a little tired. There's still much to do." Jack wanted to insist she rest, but he decided to let her choose. She had her own reasons for pushing herself. Over the next few days, she worked even faster, as if she wanted to finish everything sooner than expected. Jack asked if she planned to stay the full weeks they had agreed on, but Elena simply said, "I will leave when the work is done." Her tone was gentle, but final. The cabin was nearly spotless now. Every shelf, every corner, every window looked new. She washed curtains, repaired cracks in the walls, and even organized Jack's clothes. She cooked meals that reminded Jack of warmth he hadn't felt in years, but she herself always ate very little, as if saving food. Jack began to feel something strange, a mix of worry and something deeper he wasn't ready to name. He didn't want her to leave, but he could tell she had already made up her mind. When the last day approached, Elena packed her small bag early in the morning. The cabin looked beautiful, almost unrecognizable. Jack stood by the door, watching her tie her bag with careful hands. "You finished the work sooner than you needed to," Jack said quietly. She nodded. "Thank you for letting me stay. You've been very kind." Jack hesitated, then asked, "Where will you go now?" Elena looked down, avoiding his eyes. "Home." There was something final in her voice. Something sad. Jack felt a sudden heaviness in his chest, a feeling he never expected when he first hired her. He helped her mount the horse, but his heart felt uneasy. She thanked him again, politely but quickly, as if she didn't want him to ask more questions. As she rode away, Jack stood watching her small figure disappear down the long road. A voice inside him whispered that something was wrong, something she hadn't told him, something she was trying to protect. And for the first time in years, Jack felt a deep urge to follow someone not out of suspicion, but out of concern. That uneasy feeling stayed with him long after she vanished from sight. Jack stood outside his cabin long after Elena had disappeared down the dusty road. The wind moved softly through the trees, but his mind was restless. Something about the way she left bothered him deeply. She had thanked him politely, but her eyes held a sadness she tried to hide. It wasn't the sadness of someone leaving a job. It was the sadness of someone running out of time. He tried to ignore the feeling at first. He tried to convince himself that she was fine, that she was going home to family or friends. But the more he tried to calm himself, the stronger the worry grew. After spending weeks around her, he had learned one thing clearly. Elena was someone who carried her troubles silently. If something was wrong, she would never admit it. She would keep it hidden and face it alone. Jack saddled his horse and stood there for a long moment, debating his next move. He wasn't the kind of man who followed people. He respected others' privacy. But this time, something felt different. Something felt wrong. Finally, unable to ignore his instinct anymore, he mounted his horse and rode after her, keeping a safe distance so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. The road ahead stretched long and quiet. Jack kept his pace steady, making sure he didn't get too close. Hours passed. The sun moved higher in the sky, then slowly drifted toward the horizon. Jack could see Elena far ahead, her small figure riding with determination, never slowing down. She didn't look like someone going home with ease. She looked like someone trying to reach somewhere before it was too late. After a long ride, Elena finally turned onto a narrow road leading toward the edge of a small town Jack rarely visited. Her horse moved slowly now, showing signs of exhaustion. Jack stayed hidden behind a group of tall trees, watching carefully. He didn't want to startle her, or make her think he didn't trust her. Elena rode until she reached a small wooden house that stood alone near a field. The paint was peeling from the walls, and the roof looked worn. The place seemed forgotten by the world. Quiet, and almost empty. Jack's heart tightened when he saw her get down from the horse with a tired slump in her shoulders. Before Jack could move closer, the front door of the small house opened, and two children ran out, one boy and one girl, both barefoot and wearing old clothes. They rushed toward Elena with bright eyes and wide smiles. "Mama!" the children shouted as they wrapped their arms around her. Elena dropped to her knees, holding them tightly, her face filled with relief and love. Jack watched as tears slipped down her cheeks. She kissed their heads again and again, whispering apologies for being gone. "I'm here now," she said softly. "I brought food. I promise everything will be all right." Jack felt his heart twist. In that moment, everything became clear. She hadn't traveled to his ranch because she wanted adventure or experience. She hadn't agreed to work because she wanted to earn extra money for herself. She had done it for these children, her children who clearly depended on her. Jack stepped back, unsure whether he should approach or leave quietly. But after a few minutes, Elena stood up and guided the children back into the house. Jack decided it wasn't right to simply turn away. She might need help, even if she wouldn't ask for it. He walked slowly toward the house, making sure she could see him from a distance so he wouldn't frighten her. When Elena noticed him, she froze. Her expression changed quickly, from surprise to worry. "Mr. Turner," she said, stepping outside. "You followed me?" Jack stopped a respectful distance away. "I was worried. You left too fast. I felt something was troubling you." Her shoulders lowered slightly. She looked tired not just from the journey, but from life itself. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. "This is my personal matter." Jack nodded. "I understand. I'm not here to judge or to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted to make sure you're all right." Elena looked down at her hands. For a moment, she said nothing. Jack could see the weight on her shoulders, the kind that came from carrying too much alone. Finally, she began to talk. She told him that she was a widow. Her husband had passed away a few years ago due to illness, leaving her with 2 young children and no steady income. Everything she earned went to buying food and keeping a roof over their heads. She had no family left, no one to help her. When she heard about the mail order service, she decided to take the risk and travel far to earn enough money for the children. "I didn't mean to hide them from you," she said. "But I knew if I told the truth, people might think I was asking for charity. And I didn't want that. I only wanted to work honestly." Jack listened quietly. Every word she spoke made him respect her even more. Elena wasn't running away from responsibility, she was running toward it, doing whatever she could to give her children a better life. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jack asked gently. Elena shook her head. "Because I didn't want anyone to feel sorry for me. And I didn't want anyone to think I expected more than the job you gave me. You've already been kind enough." A small silence settled between them. Jack took a step closer, but still kept his distance, not wanting her to feel pressured. "I don't feel sorry for you," he said softly. "I admire you. You're strong. Stronger than most people I've known." Her eyes softened, but she looked away, trying to control her emotions. The children peeked from the doorway, curious about the strange man standing outside, but Elena motioned for them to wait inside. Jack glanced at the house. There were cracks in the walls, and the windows were covered with worn cloth instead of curtains. The yard was overgrown, and the fence was broken. Inside, he guessed, the shelves were probably almost empty. "How long have things been this difficult?" Jack asked quietly. Elena sighed. "Since the day I lost my husband. I tried everything, small jobs, sewing, cleaning, but nothing was enough. I didn't want my children to suffer, so I went to your ranch hoping I could earn enough money for a while." Jack felt a lump in his throat. He had lived alone for years, choosing a quiet life. But Elena didn't have a choice. She wasn't fighting for comfort, she was fighting for survival. "If you ever need help," Jack said slowly, "you can ask me." Elena's eyes widened. "I can't burden you with my problems." "It's not a burden," Jack replied. "Sometimes people need help. And sometimes helping someone feels right." Elena looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand his sincerity. Finally, her expression softened completely. "Thank you," she whispered. Jack nodded. He didn't want to push her or make promises she wasn't ready for. But he knew one thing clearly: he didn't want her to continue struggling alone. He couldn't walk away now that he had seen the truth. He couldn't forget the sight of those children running to their mother with joy in their eyes. As the sun lowered in the sky, casting warm light over the small home, Jack felt something change inside him. This wasn't just concern. It was something deeper, something that connected him to Elena and her children in a way he hadn't expected. And he knew this was only the beginning of a story that would change all of their lives. Jack stood outside the small house for a moment longer, watching Elena gather herself. The children stayed near the door, their little faces filled with curiosity. They didn't know who Jack was, but something about him didn't frighten them. Maybe it was the gentle way he stood, or the calmness in his eyes. After a few seconds, Elena stepped aside and let Jack come closer. He didn't enter the house completely. Instead, he stood near the doorway, careful not to invade their space. Inside, the home was clean but clearly struggling. The shelves in the kitchen held only a few items: some flour, a jar of salt, and a nearly empty bag of rice. The furniture was old and worn. A small blanket lay folded on the floor, showing where one of the children probably slept. Jack looked around quietly, not judging, but understanding. Everything in the house showed signs of Elena's strength. She had kept things as tidy as she could, despite the challenges. The children whispered to Elena, asking who the visitor was. She gave them a gentle smile and said, "This is Mr. Turner. He's a kind man who helped me with work." The children nodded shyly. Hiding partly behind her, Jack felt his heart warm at the sight of them. They had Elena's soft eyes and quiet nature. It was clear they meant everything to her. To help her feel comfortable, Jack didn't stay long inside. He stepped back outdoors and waited while she talked to her children. After a few minutes, Elena came outside again, closing the door gently behind her. She looked tired, but there was a softness in her expression he hadn't seen before, almost like relief. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "Even though I didn't expect it." "You don't have to thank me," Jack replied. "I'm glad I found you." Elena looked down at her hands. They were rough from work, but she held them together gently, trying to hold back the emotions inside her. Jack noticed her struggle and spoke softly. "You've been carrying everything alone," he said. "No one should have to do that." Elena sighed. "Sometimes we don't have a choice." Jack nodded. He knew she wasn't asking for sympathy. She was simply saying the truth of her life. And that truth made him admire her even more. He looked at the house again, at the broken fence and cracked walls. "If you'll allow me," he said, "I'd like to help you fix some things around here." "Nothing in return, just help." Elena shook her head gently. "You've already done a lot." "I haven't done anything," Jack said. "You did all the work on my ranch. Let me do something for you." She hesitated. She was not used to receiving help. She wasn't used to trusting people. But something about Jack felt safe. He didn't push. He didn't expect anything. He simply stood there quietly, waiting for her to decide. Finally, Elena nodded. "If you want to help," she said softly, "I won't stop you." That small acceptance meant more to Jack than she knew. He gave her a gentle smile, not too wide, not too emotional, just enough to show sincerity. The following days were different from anything Elena had experienced in a long time. Jack returned the next morning with tools and supplies. He didn't just bring nails and wood, he brought bags of food, blankets, and small treats for the children. He didn't make a big deal about any of it. He simply set them down quietly and went to work repairing the fence first. The children watched him from the window at first. Then, slowly, they grew curious and stepped outside, inching closer. Jack didn't try to talk to them too much. He let them observe him, allowing them to feel safe in their own time. Eventually, the little boy picked up a small piece of wood and brought it to him. Jack accepted it with a smile and said, "Thank you." The boy's eyes lit up, and he ran back to his sister excitedly. Elena watched everything with quiet gratitude. She wasn't used to someone showing kindness without expecting something in return. She wasn't used to someone respecting her boundaries while still standing by her side. It made her feel lighter, as if the heavy world she carried alone for years suddenly had a second pair of hands holding it. As Jack worked, he never asked about her past again. He never questioned her struggles or pushed her to explain anything. Instead, he let her talk when she wanted to. Some evenings, after fixing the roof or repairing the windows, they sat outside near the steps. The children played nearby while the sun turned the sky warm shades of orange and pink. In those quiet moments, Elena found herself sharing small pieces of her life. She told Jack about the farm she once lived on with her late husband. She spoke about the sickness that took him away. She talked about how much she wanted her children to grow up safe and happy. Jack listened patiently, never interrupting, never offering solutions that would make her feel small. He just listened. And sometimes, silence was enough. One evening, after finishing a day of repairs, Jack noticed the children struggling with an old wooden toy that was falling apart. He kneeled beside them and said, "Let me fix this." The children looked at him with confidence, something that only grows when trust begins to form. Jack repaired the toy quickly and handed it back to them. Their laughter brightened the quiet yard. Elena watched from the doorway, her heart full. She hadn't heard her children laugh like that in a long time. Slowly, Jack became a steady presence in their lives. He didn't replace anything or anyone. He simply added a new sense of safety. Elena started to relax around him. She smiled more. She slept better. She didn't feel alone anymore. One afternoon, Jack arrived with a surprise lumber for building a small porch and a new cooking pot. Elena tried to protest, saying it was too much. But he only shook his head gently. "It's not too much," he said. "It's what anyone would do." But Elena knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would ride miles to help a woman with 2 children. Not everyone would give so much without asking for anything back. Not everyone would show kindness the way Jack did, quiet, consistent, and honest. A few days later, while Jack worked on mending the roof again, Elena came outside with a cup of warm broth. She held it out to him with a soft smile. "You should take a break," she said. Jack accepted it and sat on the step. Elena sat beside him, leaving a polite space, but close enough that he could feel her presence. The sky was soft with evening colors. The children were inside, resting. The world around them felt peaceful. After a moment, Jack spoke. "I'm glad I followed you that day." Elena looked at him, surprised. "I thought you were angry when you found out." Jack smiled a little. "I wasn't angry. I was worried. And now, I'm grateful I know the truth." Elena's eyes softened. "I didn't want to trouble your life." "You didn't trouble anything," Jack said. "You made it better." A long silence settled. But it wasn't empty. It was full of unspoken understanding of 2 lives that had crossed paths at the right moment. As days turned into weeks, Jack continued helping. Elena continued healing. The children continued trusting. The small house slowly transformed into a safe, warm home again. And in the process, something gentle began to form between Jack and Elena, not rushed, not forced, just naturally growing, like a seed planted in soft soil. One evening, while the children slept and the sky glowed with moonlight, Elena whispered, "Thank you, Jack, for everything." He looked at her with calm honesty. "You don't have to thank me. I'm here because I want to be." Elena felt warmth rise in her chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't loneliness. It was something new, something she never expected to feel again. And Jack, a man who had lived years in silence, felt his heart open in a way he didn't know was possible. Their story didn't end that night. It didn't rush into anything. Instead, it unfolded slowly, day by day, a story built on trust, kindness, and second chances. A story where a cowboy who once lived alone found a family he never knew he needed. And a woman who once carried the world alone found someone willing to share its weight. Their lives were changed not by grand gestures, but by gentle ones.